Hello and welcome to the To Be Like Christ Bible Study Podcast, where we explore and explain one chapter of the Bible at a time. My name is Luke and I am thy host. And today's chapter is Genesis 27. Let's read the text together. I'm going to be reading from the English Standard Version of the Bible. And while I find it in my Bible, if you have a moment, hit the subscribe button on your podcast player so we can study together again sometime. Genesis 27 has 46 verses. Let's go ahead and read the chapter. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau his older son and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau, 'Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die.' Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing." His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go, bring them to me." So he went and took them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And she put the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So he went in to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" And he answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. And he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He said, "I am." And then he said, "Bring it near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." His father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" And he answered, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him? Yes, and he shall be blessed." As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing." Then he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, my father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him, and Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, "Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me?" So this is the text of Genesis chapter 27. We see more trouble brewing between the brothers Jacob and Esau. And to remind ourselves of some context and remind ourselves of the already rocky relationship between these two brothers, we have to go back to Genesis chapter 25, where Esau sold his birthright, or his double portion of his father's inheritance upon his death, to his brother Jacob for a bowl of stew. If you remember, Esau was a hunter, and he was coming out of the woods or wherever he was hunting, and he was famished, and he thought he was going to die of starvation. He was so exhausted. Jacob was brewing some stew at the moment, and he takes advantage of the situation. He says, "You know what, Esau, if you sell me your birthright, I'll give you a bowl of stew and you can survive. You can live to see tomorrow." Now, Esau probably wasn't really starving to death, but he was not a very smart man. He was a foolish man. That's the way the Bible presents him. And he says to Jacob, "You know what? If I starve to death, what good is my birthright anyway? I'll sell you my birthright for a bowl of stew." And the Bible says that Esau despised his birthright, that this was a really foolish decision to trade something that was sacred, of great value, for something of so little value. In chapter 25, there's this tension between the brothers even before they're born in the womb and then during their birth. And then we see the tension caused by the selling of the birthright, which we see in this chapter is something that Esau held against his brother for many years to come. Well, he's going to have something else to hold against his brother in this chapter, and that's what we just read about. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go to our outline section. But we talked about the birthright being sold in chapter 25, and in chapter 26, we read about Isaac and Rebekah as they were in Gerar. They were dealing with a guy named Abimelech. That story doesn't tie into this one a whole lot, but there is a small section, the last 2 verses of chapter 26, that relate to this chapter, and that's the wives of Esau. We're told at the end of chapter 26 that Esau married 2 Hittite women. These were women of the land. They were not people who shared the values of Isaac and Rebekah and Abraham and Sarah's family. So Esau decides that he's just going to marry 2 women that he's met, pagan women, maybe idolatrous women who might worship another god. We don't know. But what we do know is that the marriage between Esau and these 2 Hittite women caused a lot of bitterness in the relationship that he had with his parents. It said that these women made Isaac and Rebekah's life bitter. And that will come up as we get to the end of Genesis chapter 27. So let's go ahead now and go to our PDF that concisely summarizes and contains all the key information from this chapter. And of course, as always, you can download it for free on our website at tobelikechrist.com, or if you want a nice book that has all 50 outlines for the 50 chapters of Genesis in it already printed off for you, you can buy one on Amazon. There'll be links to those things in the description. The first thing that we always address in these studies is when these events happened. So Isaac is born about 1900 BC. That's an approximate rough date, but 1900 years before Jesus. Esau and Jacob were born when Isaac was 60 years old. Isaac lived to be 180 years total, so he lived a pretty long life. He dies around 1716 BC. Utilizing some of the details from upcoming chapters, it seems safe to say that the events recorded in Genesis 27 took place sometime between the years 1816 and 1757 BC. So this would have been approximately between the 80th year of Isaac's life and his 135th year of life. We don't know exactly when in that time frame, but there's about 50 years roughly or so between when Isaac's 80 and 135. So he's old, but he's not near his death because he dies at 180. As we open up the chapter, we're going to see that he seems to think that he's not going to live nearly as long as he ends up living, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's go down to our main characters section and make sure that we are appropriately introduced to all of the key characters here. They're going to be pretty familiar from our other studies. First, we have Isaac. He is Abraham's son, and he's the husband of Rebekah. He was blessed by God, and he became very rich. We have Rebekah, who is Isaac's wife, and she's the mother of Jacob and Esau. We have Esau, who is the firstborn of Isaac and Rebekah, and then his twin brother, who came immediately after him, holding on to his heel as they were born, Jacob, the twin brother of Esau and the favorite of Rebekah. And that's a key detail that we were told in a previous chapter, I believe it was chapter 25, is that Esau is Isaac's favorite, and Jacob is Rebekah's favorite. Isaac likes Esau because Esau hunts game, or hunts animals, and then he prepares them, and Isaac really likes the meat that he prepares. There were probably other reasons that he was the favorite also, but Esau is Isaac's favorite, and Jacob is Rebekah's favorite, and that informs us as to why Rebekah acts the way that she does in pulling off this deception, in stealing the blessing from Esau that we read about in chapter 27. Now, going down to our where section or to our map, we have a pretty locked down location for where the events of this chapter happen, and that's in Beersheba. Beersheba is approximately 15 miles to the southwest of Hebron, a place where Abraham spent a lot of time, definitely getting down to the southern border of what we consider to be Canaan or the Promised Land. Okay, so now we can go over to our outline, to our comprehension section, make sure we understand what we just read and store this story away so that we can build on it in the future. I think this is a pretty well-known story. If you grew up around churches, probably heard this one in Bible class when you were a kid, or probably heard it in several sermons. But if you've never heard it before, this is a really interesting one. So let's get into it. Our first section today is going to be verses 1 through 4, and I've entitled it, Isaac prepares to bless Esau. The text says that Isaac was growing old and that he was also blind, or he could barely see at all, and he feared that the day of his death was near. Now, as we talked about on our timeline and what we can put together from future chapters, the day of his death actually wasn't near. He had probably at least 50 years left to live. But of course, none of us know how long we're going to live, and maybe he felt like he was going to kick the bucket. Maybe he was sick or something and caught some flu, and he was feeling especially down one day. And so he concludes that his day to die is very soon. Well, he tells his son Esau to go out hunting and to kill an animal and to prepare him a delicious meal, to prepare him this game that he really loves, and part of the reason that Esau is his favorite son. Isaac intends to bestow his blessing on Esau, and this was something evidently that was also given to the firstborn before the father died, this verbal blessing. And this is really interesting. We see the birthright, but there's also the blessing, and they seem to be two different things, as Esau points out later in the chapter. The birthright is this double portion of the inheritance, but the blessing is this verbal blessing, this verbal gift almost that is spoken over the oldest son. And it seems from the text and from what we can read in other places that there's more to this than just kind of it's more than just a well wish. It's more than me just saying nice things about you and wishing you well into the future, but there was actually something sacred, maybe something you could say spiritual about this, that the blessing being given to the older son when this was spoken, it actually had real ramifications in the real world as to how God was going to bless the individual who received it. We definitely see in the biblical text that the way that Isaac and Esau talk about this blessing is that it's very significant and it's very meaningful, and that it's more than just nice words. So Isaac, thinking that he is going to die very soon, he wants to speak this blessing over his eldest son before he no longer has the chance to do it. So that's section number 1. And that sets us up for the events of the rest of the chapter. Section number 2, Rebekah and Jacob's plan to deceive Isaac, verses 5 through 17. Rebekah overheard Isaac and Esau's conversation. And when Esau leaves to go hunting, she knows that he's going to be gone a while. It takes a while. I don't know what he's hunting. We're not told the animal. That would be interesting, but we don't know what he's hunting. But it's going to take him a while to kill that game, to dress it, to prepare the food. She calls Jacob to her, and Jacob being her favorite, she begins to devise a plan to deceive her husband into giving Jacob the blessing instead. We see here that the favoritism that's given to Jacob and Esau, there's been a wedge driven between them, but this favoritism also seemingly has led to a wedge being driven between Rebekah and her husband, in that, who would be willing to do this to their own husband and deceive them in this way? Evidently, there's some real problems in this family. Actually, there's a lot of problems in this family. And that once again reminds us that God's not using perfect people here. He's not blessing these people and accomplishing his will through them because they're just so perfect and righteous and great and so functional as a working family. No, God is bringing about his plan in spite of their family problems and the difficult relationships that exist here. Rebekah tells Jacob that she can cook the meat of 2 young goats in a way that will pass off as the game that Esau makes and prepares for his father. So she can take these goats and make them taste pretty much exactly as to what Esau is going to prepare. And she tells Jacob that he can take this meat to his father and he can pretend to be Esau. Rebekah then brought Esau's clothing and she gave it to Jacob. That way he would smell like him, and the clothing would be familiar to Isaac. And she even put the skin of the goats on his hands and on his neck. And the reason that she does this is because Esau is a very hairy man. Now, he must have been very hairy if the skin of a goat and the hair of a goat could pass off as his own, but that's what the Bible tells us. He's a very hairy man, and Jacob is concerned that his father's going to feel him, maybe take his hand or grab his neck, and he's going to realize that it's smooth, and that's going to be a dead giveaway that it's Jacob and not Esau. So Rebekah not only cooks this goat meat into something similar to what Esau would have otherwise prepared, but she also takes the skin of the goat and puts it on Jacob so that he is now a hairy man. And when all of this is prepared and the food is prepared, she sends Jacob in to talk to Isaac. And now we have this suspense, wondering if this plan is really going to work, and if it does work, what are going to be the implications? We now go to our next section, verses 18 through 30, which we've entitled, and this is kind of a giveaway of what happens, but Isaac is tricked and gives Jacob the blessing. Jacob approaches his father, and when he's asked who he is, Jacob lies, and he says, "I am Esau, your firstborn." Isaac was immediately suspicious, and he asks this Esau how he could have captured this game so quickly and prepared it so quickly and been back with this delicious food in the amount of time that he has, because evidently there hasn't been that much time that's gone by. And Jacob tells another lie, and this one I consider to be especially bad because he invokes the name of God in it. He says, "Oh, well, the Lord helped me to find the animal really quickly because, he wanted me to be able to bring it back here to you so that you could bless me." Yeah, right. Okay. So Isaac, though, is still suspicious, and this kind of tells you how blind Isaac must have been. Must have been very limited in sight. He asks his son then to approach him so that he can feel him. And upon touching his hands, Isaac responds, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." I'm guessing that Jacob and Esau's voices were somewhat similar, at least enough to still at least enough to pass off this deception. Maybe Jacob changed his voice in some way to try to help him sound like Esau. We don't know, but Isaac recognizes, he's like, something's wrong with your voice, but everything else, I guess, is checking out. Isaac then asks again, are you really my son Esau? And Jacob lied again, and he said, I am. Being contented then, or at least unwilling to press this issue further, Isaac blesses Jacob. And it's this great verbal blessing, which I'll read you again. It's from verses 28 and 29. He says, may God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. And so this is a very significant blessing, especially if God confirms this blessing and then treats Jacob accordingly based on the words of Isaac. You notice he says here that his brothers are going to serve him. And so now Esau has given up his birthright, which was originally his because he was firstborn, but now he doesn't even get the supremacy or the position of being firstborn and having his brothers under him, because that blessing has now been given away to his younger brother Jacob. So this deception that has been concocted by Rebekah and Jacob has now worked, and Jacob is the recipient of this great series of blessings. That takes us into our next section, verses 31 through 40. Esau receives a lesser blessing. The text says that almost as soon as Jacob had left, Esau returned with the meat from his hunt, and Isaac trembled very violently when he realized what had happened, when he realized that he had been deceived. He had been suspicious. He set his suspicions aside, but then Esau walks in and he says, Father, I'm here with the game that you asked of me. And Isaac realizes that he's made a terrible, terrible mistake. Isaac told Esau how Jacob had deceived him and how he had already given away the greatest blessing. But Esau cries out, cursing his brother for now tricking him twice, the first time taking his birthright and now taking his blessing. And Esau cries out with a, quote, exceedingly great and bitter cry. And he asks his father if he has any blessing left for him. Isaac says that he had pretty much given away everything to Jacob, and now he really didn't have a whole lot to bless Esau with. But he does end up blessing him, but he gives him a lesser blessing, and he does tell him that he is going to be the subordinate. He's going to be inferior to his brother. He's going to be Jacob's servant. Just as God predicted when Rebekah was having this difficult pregnancy, God had prophesied that there were two nations within her that were struggling, striving together. And here we see, even outside of the womb now, that prophecy coming to pass, that these two nations are fighting together. These two men who will become great nations are fighting together in their brotherhood. And this tension continues, and the relationship is now soured for years to come. Will the relationship ever be restored? Will it ever be fixed? Well, we'll have to wait on that, but at least for the next couple decades, there's no fixing to be seen. Verses 41 through 46 is the end of our chapter today. Jacob flees from Esau is the heading. Esau planned to kill Jacob after his father's death. He said, well, my father's about to die, that his days of mourning are going to come about, and then after that, I'm going to kill Jacob. And that's how he kind of comforted himself. That's how he made himself feel better, was in this murderous plot that he was putting together. But Rebekah caught wind of this plot, and she sends Jacob away to Haran, which, remember, is way hundreds of miles up north, where she had originally come from, and where Abraham's servant had brought her from to marry Isaac. She's now sending Jacob back up there to the house of her brother Laban. And it's interesting, she goes to Isaac and kind of as an excuse, it seems like, she says, well, I don't want Jacob marrying one of these Hittite women like Esau has done, so let's send Jacob up to Haran to find a wife up there. Now, certainly it was true that the Hittite women had given her a lot of grief, but she is also just trying to protect Jacob from Esau and to get him out of here so that he can't be murdered by his brother. So she presents this as if she's just interested in him finding a wife, but really she's trying to get him out of the crosshairs of his murderous brother. So what we're going to see as we open up the verses of chapter 28 is that Isaac agrees with this. He doesn't want Jacob marrying a Hittite, so he agrees to send Jacob up north, which is going to spare him from his brother's intentions, but it's going to set him on a whole new course of life and a whole new place. Now, how does that work now that the promise is that Isaac's descendants are going to inherit the land of Canaan, but Jacob's leaving. He's going way up north to Haran. So how's that work? Isaac was told by the Lord not to leave Canaan. You remember in chapter 26, I believe, during the famine? But now Jacob is leaving. So is he going to come back? How's God going to work it out that he returns to be the inheritor of the land of Canaan, him and his descendants? All that will be answered in the later chapters of the book of Genesis and Exodus. So that does it for our summary of Genesis chapter 27. Let's finish out with our application from the text today. Tricking a poor old blind man who thinks he's on the brink of death for personal gain is kind of a disgraceful thing to do. There's no nice way to say it. It's a disgraceful thing to do. But God can use people with disgraceful pasts for future good. Just because you've done disgraceful things in your past doesn't mean God can't use you. Later in the book of Genesis, we're going to read about how God used Jacob to father the Israelite nation, or the beginning of the Israelite nation. His sons become the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are super important in the overall Bible story. So Jacob, even though he has somewhat of a disgraceful past, God still uses him. Likewise, for us, for application, your usefulness in God's story isn't limited just because you have a few disgraces marring your history. And for me, at least, I find that to be very encouraging. Your future is always bright. Your future can always be better if you give yourself over to the Lord to be used in his service. We see this in people throughout the Bible, including people like the Apostle Paul, who had a really dark past, but God brightens up his future and he uses him in an incredible way in his kingdom. And so that's a reason to give thanks to God that his character allows people to have second chances. And that's one of the real beauties and praiseworthy things about the Christian God, the true God of the universe. So thank God for his grace. That'll do it for our Bible study in Genesis chapter 27 today. Thanks for joining me again. Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow to see what happens to Jacob in chapter 28.